All righty. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Case Study of Benefits, W-2 Employment, and a Worker Cooperative, Findings from Creatives Rebuild New York's Artist Employment Program. My name is Jamie Sharp, and I'm the program manager here at Grantmakers in the Arts. I use she, they pronouns, and I am a light-skinned Black person in my 20s. I'm wearing a brown patterned sweater, and my hair is pulled back. GIA is headquartered on the unceded land of the Lenape and Wappinger peoples. We ask you to join in acknowledging the Lenape and Wappinger communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. So just as a reminder, today's webinar will be recorded and shared out to all registrants. So if you have to hop off early, no worries. Or if you have colleagues running late, we will get this recording to them. But before we begin, please take a minute to review the Zoom features so that you have an optimal experience with us today. If you have a question for our tech team during the webinar, please feel free to use the chat function and message LGC Tech Jess. Otherwise, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to submit questions for our presenters. If you would like your experience to include live captioning, please select closed caption or the CC feature in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen and select show subtitles. For 2 years, Creatives Rebuild New York supported employment and benefits for 300 artists in collaboration with over 100 community-based organizations across New York State. In this webinar, we will focus on this program and specifically the program's 2 employment models. In some collaborations, artists were directly employed by their partnering organization. In others, they were employed by Tribeworks, a cooperative portable benefits platform that provided employment and access to fringe benefits. We will use Urban Institute's recent report that examines these 2 models to reflect on the program's impact and ramifications for future programs, philanthropic investment, and policy. Today's webinar was designed by Creatives Rebuild New York, and GIA is so thrilled to be a presenting partner. And without further ado, I will pass it to Sarah to introduce our panel. And to save some time in our conversation today, we encourage you to check out the full bios of our speakers on our GIA website, which Jess will also be dropping a link to that page in the chat. And Sarah, I will hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good after. Almost going to say good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's see. Thank you, Jamie. We are so excited to be here with the GIA community to share this amazing report. And to do that, I have an amazing panel of folks whose bios you've seen on the website already. But we do have one, I think, update, more recent update. Bo Wages, the lead from Tribeworks, is with us today. The founder, Joseph Curidan, cannot be with us as he is under the weather, as many folks I know are this season. Let's see. So today we're here to talk about the Urban Institute's new report, Empowering Artists Through Employment. And I think I'll start off just talking a little bit about Creatives Rebuild New York. I'm the executive director there. And we are a 3-year, $125 million investment in artist futures, funded by the Mellon, Ford, and Stavros Niarchos Foundation. During our 3 years, we ran a guaranteed income program for 2,400 artists across New York State. We provided artists $1,000 a month for 18 months of unrestricted, no strings attached cash. In addition, we ran an artist employment program, which we'll talk a lot about today, for 300 artists who collaborated with over 100 community-based organizations working to further their missions in our New York communities. That happened over a 2-year period where artists received a salary of $65,000 a year plus benefits. But we're here today really to talk specifically about the artist employment program and the 2 models, as Jamie mentioned. When we were designing this work, we had a think tank that helped co-design with us. And the think tank had artists and guaranteed income experts and nonprofit organization representatives that met for about 6 months. And one of the big struggles that we had was sort of how would we have collaborations with between artists and organizations from organizations that were small, that were not the usual folks who were funded, and were unable to offer either employment, some were volunteer run, and were not able to offer healthcare benefits, because these were things that we knew that we wanted the artists that were working to have in place. And so our solution, after many discussions and tons of research, was to partner with Tribeworks. And you'll hear more about what Tribeworks is in a minute. And Tribeworks, which is now run by Mackenzie Jones, was able to provide a space where arts and culture organizations who couldn't provide the W-2 employment and the healthcare benefits could hold the employment for the artist and provide the artist with the healthcare benefits that they needed. And as an added bonus, they also have the opportunity to join the worker cooperative that is Tribeworks. So you'll hear more about this, but for now, I'd love to start speaking with some of my lovely colleagues. So let me start with Mark. Mark is here with us from the Urban Institute, and I'm wondering, Mark, if you might be able to lay the groundwork for us in this discussion and talk about the research report that you just released, looking at the Artist Employment Program.
Sure, thank you. And thanks, Sarah, and for the introduction. I'm Mark. I'm a white male with brownish gray hair and a beard, in a blue shirt, and a white room with a bookcase in the background. So our research and the report came out a couple of weeks ago, focused on one element of the artist employment program that Sarah highlighted, and that's the effects of the two employment models on artists and organizations. So our research was really set up as a comparison between those two models, although to get to that comparison, we really looked at overall trends across the two models too, and did find a lot of common themes. So to do this, we set up and engaged with the Leadership Council of 11 artist participants, you'll hear from one shortly, to help guide the study design and questions. And we reviewed existing literature and data on New York artists, fielded surveys to artists and organizations who participated, and held focus groups with artists and held interviews with organizations. So I think there's a few things in the program design that Sarah mentioned that we think are particularly relevant to our study and sort of what we were able to find and how it basically came together. First, the program was designed as a collaboration between artists and organizations. They applied jointly, and there was space created for an artist's personal practice, which was part of the design. So I think that was something that really came out in the program design in terms of balancing power dynamics away from a standard employer-employee relationship. And that went for both direct employment and employment through Tribeworks as well. But I think it colored sort of the overall engagement for pretty much everybody. Second, the nature of the collaboration was flexible. Artists and organizations were given a lot of space to figure out working relationships. I'll touch on this in a second, that had positives and challenges. Third, organizations with the payroll structure, again, were selected in direct employment, as Sarah mentioned. Those without such a structure were selected into Tribeworks. So this means organizations directly employing artists were larger, and that had some also ramifications for our findings too. It meant this wasn't just a comparison, all things being equal, of direct versus employment through Tribeworks, but there's other things at play too. And I think organization side is one of those things. Fourth, organizations could work with multiple artists. So this led to more opportunities for collaboration within these kinds of collaborations and learning, but also to things like potential for friction as a number of relationships to manage increased and got more complex. So I'm going to relate the findings really quickly here in terms of what we found overall, and I will not get too far in the weeds. Those weeds are in the report. So overall, across both employment models, we really found artists reported gains in both financial and personal well-being and professional development. So about half of artists reported gaining new technical skills, about 2/3 reported gaining and developing new artistic practices, and about 3/4 gained networking connections. So these were kind of similar across both models, whether it was direct employment or Tribeworks, through Tribeworks. On things like emotional wellness, about half overall reported some gains, although here there was a little bit of a split. We want to talk about that in a minute. About 2/3 for Tribeworks reported emotional wellness gains, and about 43% for those who were employed directly. That said, even though I think overall we found really positive feedback across artists and organizations, there were a number of participants that had real difficulties. So this included things like coming to terms on roles and working conditions, also the things like quality of coverage and benefits. Things worked out fine for many people, but for some artist participants in particular, there were real challenges in obtaining benefits they needed. So in terms of what we found for organizations, we found most reported pretty close alignment with artists from the start, even with some startup challenges, and that working with relationships with artists went pretty smoothly. Organizations employing artists directly reported artists were relatively more closely integrated into the organization's activities than those using Tribeworks, although both model types reported similar levels of alignment. Also, the AEP influenced employment practices in a number of ways. These examples included an organization that increased salaries for everybody, and also improved things like disability accommodations. So the specific program of the AEP actually had broader ramifications for the organizations participating too. In terms of lessons for programs, I think a partner like Tribeworks, because it can support smaller organizations, really can open opportunities and partnerships to a broader range of participants than would otherwise happen. Sarah mentioned up top, that was actually a key role of focusing on Tribeworks, and I think it really did serve for that purpose really effectively. Also, the AEP's flexible model had advantages and challenges, led to partnerships developing organically, but some uncertainty and friction required support, which both Tribeworks was able to provide, as well as CRNY in their own work. Also, the AEP did a lot to preserve artists' autonomy. This is things like including stipulating that artists had time for their own personal practice, to the roles that Tribeworks and CRNY played to help support the collaborations. So there's takeaways for policy too, but I'll hold on specifics for the moment. I think in a general sense, they revolve around how the model of this program can really inform how we think about supporting artists and cultural workers and treating artists and cultural workers as employers and thinking about them in terms of employment policy. So with that, I'll pause.
Thank you. Thank you. That was helpful. I'm wondering if now we can turn to you, Bo. You know, artists, culture bearers, creative workers often work as gig workers and have 1099 employment, right? As we know, as you know well, right? This doesn't allow them to have worker protections, health insurance, and all the of the employment supports that W-2 employees receive. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit to us about sort of why Tribeworks was founded, sort of the goals of the organizations, the goal of the organization. I'm going to load on a few questions here, Bo, so bear with me. How it worked prior to, you worked prior to working with CRNY, right? With creatives across the US. But I'm also interested in hearing about sort of how you saw the role of your work within the artist employment program. So that's a lot, but we're trying to get sort of just the background before we dig in with Nydia and Christina, who were sort of participants in the program.
Great. Yeah, no worries. Really excited about it and excited to be here. So when we're thinking about the founding of Tribeworks, it happened in 2019. And there was a group of BIPOC creators and developers who were experiencing a lot of the things that you were talking about, Sarah, right? Gig work often makes it really hard to access healthcare, and especially when you're trying to stitch together income from a lot of various places. Tribeworks allows arts organizations of all sizes to provide employment benefits and protections. On behalf of artists, our cooperative pools multiple streams of 1099 work and can actually turn that into W-2 employment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the AEP program and then also talk about what we do generally. So AEP was fully funded, right? So Tribeworks received money from CRNY, and then we were able to turn that into W-2 employment for 175 artists. All of these artists received health insurance, and 130 of them were able to enroll in medical, dental, and vision benefits, with some who are also able to enroll in retirement savings and take advantage of discounted features and freeze features like financial planning. So if there are organizations who want to fully fund artists, we had that opportunity for AEP. And then for other organizations that we work with, we can pool multiple streams of income. So if organizations have a grant and artists also have other 1099 work that might be related to teaching a course or doing any other type of work, they can pull that and fold that in together and make that W-2 employment, still giving those same accesses, right? Benefits and other support that really allow people to have lines of credit and do the things that they need, send kids to school and save appropriately. So at a high level, that's where we are. I can dive in a little bit deeper, but at a high level, that's where we are and what we do.
Thank you, Bo. I appreciate it. I'm wondering if now we can turn to Nydia. So Nydia is the amazing director of Borinquen Dance Theatre. And I'm wondering, oh, I have Christina here instead, but I'm wondering if we could focus on Nydia first, and then we'll get to Christina. Nydia, you had artists, right? I think you worked with 2 artists throughout the artist employment program. And I'd love to hear from you a little bit about sort of what that was like, and if there were some differences between how you worked with artists through the artist employment program versus how your organization worked with artists prior to the program, and then just sort of any benefits, challenges you faced. Again, the long question, but the work that you do is so amazing. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, that would be great.
Okay, my name again is Nydia Padilla-Rodriguez, pronouns she, her, ella. I consider myself Boricua brown and very proud of being Puerto Riqueña. Borinquen Dance Theatre is a program that really is about the discipline of dance training with high academic expectations for our youth. When I heard about Creative's artwork, I took a chance to apply for 2 artists. And to be quite frank with you, I wasn't sure if I was even going to be accepted because we are such a small organization. Being in existence for 42 years, we have never had a full-time employee other than myself while I was working a full-time job. So it was almost like working 2 jobs. And of course, volunteers and my husband, who was always very supportive. The honor of having these 2 artists, it was almost like a major blessing, just like winning the lotto. When I heard about how Tribeworks would be paying the salary and health benefits, that was another major asset. My board was a little concerned because the 2 artists were going to be making a lot more salary, a higher salary than my own. But I wasn't worried about that because I felt that I had already retired from my official job and had health benefits. And I really wanted to work with the 2 artists to allow for them to grow as individuals, as artists, with respect, with integrity, and contributions to our community. There were some challenges in the beginning because of the artist's personal practices, and I needed to make sure that they understood that there would be tasks affiliated with the organization. But my long-term goal was to somehow arrange for this partnership where I would be able to hire at least one, if not both. That was my long-term goal. The idea of having the flexibility was great. The challenges that we face, it was very different for me to actually start removing myself from some tasks to allow for some growth there as administrators or even as artists. The work with the artists was amazing. It was definitely a contribution to Borinquen in terms of expanding. I actually had them be part of our retreat with the board members, where we all worked together in collaboration to revisit the mission statement of Borinquen Dance Theatre. So they were part of that process, so they could start feeling like there was a buy-in and they were part of our family. After the 2 years, I really worked extensively to continue going after grants. And I have to say that I was fortunate enough to hire at least 1 artist as the assistant artistic director with health benefits. So that's something, a major, major contribution for Borinquen Dance Theatre. Took a lot of hard work, but the kind of work that the individual artist was able to bring to the table really helped make a difference for building on our mission statement. The second artist basically she moved on to pursue her master's degree, which I thought was a wonderful idea for her to go down that track, because that was basically what she was more interested in. And I will say that one of the things that I think worked for Borinquen was, although they were employed by Tribeworks, I actually created job descriptions with specific titles and tasks for them to see if you were to be hired within our organization, this is the kind of work that it will take. And one of them was the assistant artistic director, which is the person that I recently hired with benefits, because my goal was to eventually be able to make that transition of succession planning and give this artist an opportunity to take on the role as the new artistic director of Borinquen Dance Theatre that has been in existence for 42 years. So I'm at a point right now where we are in the position of capacity building, where the infrastructure will be in place for this assistant artistic director. So when he takes on that role, we can move forward with him not having to go through all the changes that I had to. So the intent is really to continue to ensure the success of the artists. And that's where I'm at. I have to say that I'm very content that we recently received support from New York State Council of the Arts, local foundation, the Health Foundation, Greater Rochester Health Foundation, and the Monroe County Arts Center, as well as the Rochester Area Community Foundation, to help us continue building the capacity for success. I don't know if I hope I answered
Thank
your
you.
question.
You did. And I think what's amazing is you also demonstrated all the work that an administrator has to do, right? And the idea of thinking about employees and caring for them, and then thinking about supporting employees and artists, right, in their goals, and figuring out how to do that while managing the goals of your organization and its commitment to community. So thank you. So thank you. We're not done yet, Nydia, but I'll move on to Christina for a minute. Christina Hunt Wood, who is an artist who was part of the Artist Employment Program. I'm wondering if you could talk through sort of what it was like for your 2 years with the Artist Employment Program, and sort of how the benefits, challenges, how you worked with Tribeworks. Maybe that's where we could start.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, I'm coming from a very rural area, and as Nydia was talking about, the small organizations with very little infrastructure, that is definitely where I was. And Tribeworks provided this really nice alternative approach to employment for these smaller organizations, and it offered some stability that allowed me to I left a fairly secure corporate job, not necessarily aligned with my values and dreams, but I left that job for the Creatives Rebuild New York program, and I wouldn't have been able to do it had I given up all of the benefits that would have been coming along with it. So it made working in the arts sector a possibility for me. And working through Tribeworks also benefited my organization by funding a creative worker, me, and contributing to the consistency in their mission. I worked for 2 different organizations, which I'll get into a little bit later, but the first one, the people that were hired to work at the organization were, it was cleaning staff and then gallery sitters. And in the second organization was primarily administrative. So suddenly they had a creative person working, not full-time, but there consistently. Also, I think that it was really helpful for working through Tribeworks that there was this progressive template that, their HR documents had a very different vibe than what a lot of employers were using, kind of staid ideas about what work looks like. And I think that Tribeworks had something a little bit more progressive, and we pulled from that as we were like building the Creatives Rebuild New York working agreements, which was between myself and the organization. And it really helped foster some conditions for creative success and some equity, and sort of acknowledging the fact that like artists don't always work like, you know, the 9 to 5. And so that was really helpful. I think that there was an urge to want to sometimes go back to an older model of employment, which created some tension, but we'll get into that. Anyway, so another really fantastic piece about having Tribeworks as holding my employment was that, you know, early in my collaboration with the first organization, Tribeworks was able to provide really critical third-party HR support that helped manage this conflict between myself and the organization. And you know, my original partnering organization was led by the executive director, who was the founder, who was also you know, one of the board members, and her partner was a board member. So, you know, small town, small, you know, not a lot of resources, and so making do, but that created an opportunity for a conflict of interest in trying to resolve an issue, you know, fairly. And so, you know, Tribeworks really was that neutral third party, and you know, it worked in collaboration with Creatives Rebuild New York to offer mediation and ensure that the resolution was dealt with fairly. You know, and while I was extremely anxious through that period, because there was like a precariousness of the job, and I wasn't sure how it was going to go, I definitely felt more comforted knowing that the employment was being held by that third party, that my paycheck was coming from a third party, and that the conflict could be resolved, and I wouldn't have to worry about sort of a sudden change. There was going to be somebody, you know, maintaining that, yeah. And so, you know, eventually the relationship between my original organization and I dissolved, and that was after mediation. And because Tribeworks was holding my employment, it was kind of an relatively easy transition for me to move on to another organization. So I started working with Roxbury Arts Group, and you know, when the executive director and I met, and they were able to present, and she was like, I'm going to present it to the board and see what they say. And they were like, so what do we have to do? And it was like, she's, you know, all the HR stuff is in place, you know, but there were some things that needed to be addressed, but really it kind of streamlined the process, which made it easy to say yes for that board of directors. With only 1 year left in the grant period and everything, it wasn't going to be too taxing. And I will just make a little side note that I think that for me, and I don't know if this is the same for everybody, but there was that like having Tribeworks hold my employment kind of even the playing field, so that the collaboration and the employer, the true employer, were a little bit more on even grounds in some ways. Like it just was not, it didn't feel like as much of a hierarchy when our agreements were working, and we were, you know, and we were like doing our work. So additionally, you know, there were the benefits that were mentioned earlier, such as healthcare, dental insurance. There was a $900 stipend that kind of came with that healthcare insurance, and a modest life insurance policy. And in the second year, there was a retirement option as well, which was really great. And there were really nice opportunities through CRNY, but like also Tribeworks, to network with creatives, to you know, take some professional development courses, and just get to kind of be a part of that community as well. You know, I would say that there was also the membership. You could join the membership of Tribeworks and become kind of like part of the union. And, you know, I will say that like the short period of time of like the 2-year span made it a little bit hard to commit to that kind of thing. I was like, voting rights, like I'm only here for another year, you know. But so I, you know, some of that short-term relationship with that model, you know, some of the benefits didn't completely align. But you know, some of the challenges I think come came from being from a rural area, and that, you have this collective that's trying to, a cooperative that's trying to, make sure everybody has something. And for me, for the health insurance, many of the in-network providers were coming from like 50 miles away. And I, quite frankly, like we live in a whatchamacallit, like a healthcare desert in a sense. So, first of all, like having those providers being about 50 miles away means that, like, if I didn't have a reliable vehicle, that would be like it would be terrible. And then the other part for me was that I wanted to really maintain my healthcare providers, my dentist and everybody, and not have to drive to Kingston or to Albany or to Binghamton to get that access. And by uprooting those relationships for that short-term opportunity, it really could have like messed me up, because once you leave a practice, you might not be able to get back in because there aren't that many providers in this area. So I spent out of pocket. I kept my insurance, and that was a bummer. But I do think that a lot of people benefited from offering, and I know that they changed the offering. They adjusted it the next year, and I didn't. I just kind of stuck with what I was doing at that point. But that was something that that was tricky. And so, just final thoughts, my experience working through Tribeworks was really pretty positive. It provided that stability and during the unsure times, and opportunities for growth and benefits. And, it also helped highlight some of the gaps maybe in addressing unique needs of rural artists and rural workers, creative workers. But, I hope this feedback is helpful, and thank you.
Thank you. I think this is wonderful. I think you've pointed out I put in the chat sort of our implementation or process evaluation for folks, which I think points out sort of some of the struggles that you have pointed out around sort of working statewide is really difficult, right? Especially when you're talking about healthcare access. I think there's a little bit in there about sort of conflict about, I would say less than 5% of artists experience conflict, but it definitely was there. And then just the need for CRNY and Tribeworks partnered with us on this to create sort of mediation for folks, I think was really important. Anyway, but the idea that the importance of the money following the artist, right, and that benefits and the employment following the artist was something that we tried. I think we mostly succeeded to have it follow the artist as much as we could, just understanding sort of the reason why this work was set up in the first place. So thank you. I'm gonna just ask Nydia. I just have one follow-up question for you, Nydia, about I think just the experience of sort of you've worked with artists forever, but that sort of the experience of the artist as employee and how that maybe furthered your mission at all, right? How did the community react to that? Did you see a difference? Did you not see a difference? And when you were working with artists who were employed versus how you've worked with artists in the past, or was it seamless?
I think the community began to acknowledge the contribution of creatives, artwork, and tribes work, because we were really going all out to promote this collaboration, and social media was a lot more extensive. The type of activities that we were working on together as a team, quite a few workshops in the community, students visiting our studio. The fact that we actually moved from Hochstein School, which was our second home, while the two artists were signed to Borinquen, that first year I actually received a grant to renovate a location for our own studio. So that was really a big deal. And I was able to announce that I had these two artists now working with Borinquen. That included the mayor, the executive director of the county government, and folks from the state Senator Sandra Brook. And I thought that was a contribution for leveraging, funding to continue this type of collaboration. So it was definitely something very, very positive. The more I think about it and reflect, the salaries of both artists, some people were pretty shocked about the the level of the contributions from creatives art. But in my mind, I thought, this was an opportunity to also really change the mindset of funders, to begin to really respect the work of artists as individuals. And then how can we work together to incorporate them so that they can become employees with full benefits and a salary comparable for, success. And so I basically use that as leverage, to be quite frank with you, so that artists that I, was able to hire are respected in a way where we want to continue growing. This is part of capacity building. Succession planning is something that you just cannot focus on programming. You also need to focus on staffing. And most funding sources, the focus is more on staffing versus or programming versus staffing. But I think that with several meetings with different funders and community leaders, there's been a shift, at least I could say in Rochester, New York, with the mindset of allowing for capacity building and creating the type of infrastructure to hire artists on a full-time basis. So that's where I'm at right now in Rochester, New York. So I'm very proud of that. But I will tell you this, if it wasn't for this opportunity of working with Tribeworks and Creatives Rebuild, who knows what would be happening. Probably would continue year after year as a soloist, along with, other funding sources, but not the same. I think this was instrumental in helping me really start focusing on succession planning. After 43 years, we want to be able to sustain BDT for the next 40-something years.
That's great, Nydia. Thank you. I'm wondering if I could ask Christina again too, maybe just to share a little bit about your own practice, right? What did this mean for you as an artist, for forgetting the structures and everything else that you spoke so wonderfully about? Was it helpful for your artistic practice?
Absolutely. There was probably about like I want to say, I would say about like maybe a little bit more, a third of the time was my personal practice, and then I was also like the 2/3 working for the organization, which was also really creative and really engaged parts of the work I do, which is more community focused. But in that realm, I was really able to become a bit of a teaching artist and do a lot of media work with students and with other adults that were curious, and kind of develop those skills, which I hadn't really done much teaching art, I hadn't been a teacher much. So that was something that was really fantastic. But in my personal practice, it gave me time to really just be an artist and not have to, sort of jam everything into, the couple hours after I got home from work, right? I could apply for residencies, and I did. I attended 2 different residencies, one at Wassaic Project, and then another in the Catskills, like a small, quaint, lovely residency. And so I was able to participate in those without having to, take the time off of work and have to negotiate with my bosses. It was like part of what I was there to do. And I, was able to work on projects that were larger and do research and kind of like keep my mind in that, in the game, without having to worry about a lot of other, irrelevant things in my corporate job, right? I mean, irrelevant, like not to them, but to me. But so, yeah, it was incredible. I was able to meet with a lot of new artists, like during those residency periods where there were other people working. So I got to show my work in some really wonderful places, including Wasaic Project at Hobart and William Smith's Gallery in Geneva, New York. And yeah, just broaden my scope and meet people who are other Creatives Rebuild New York artists and travel to their studios and check out what they're doing. And so there was this flexibility to network, to learn from each other, to go to, like I said, go to the residencies and go to different shows, I traveled and went to see shows that I probably wouldn't have gone to see. I went to Scotland and I went and saw fiber artists in Shetland, it was incredible. So yes, those are some of the things that I gleaned from my experience. Did you have any other questions about
No, that's great. I'm so excited. It was interesting. A lot of folks that we spoke to spent some time traveling and learning, right? Mostly for their craft, some for relaxation, which is also important, but a lot of folks really were able to spend their funds to go learn, right? And go talk to other artists. And I think we forget how important that work is and also how costly that can be for folks, right? And so thank you. That's super helpful. Let's see. I'm wondering, Mark, if you might want to jump in and just given everything that you've been hearing, sort of, is this what was reflected in the research? Is this what your team of artists talked to you about? Is this what we should be thinking about?
So yeah, I mean, I think to start off, yes. Bit of a leading question there, but pretty clear that yes. I think as what Christina was talking about was, I think, reflected pretty broadly from a number of circumstances. I mean, one thing we tried to do in the report, in the research, was really to kind of get at this relationship of how it actually affected people's practice and outcomes. And I think part of that was looking at the wide range of disciplines. I think people can figure out how the kind of engagement could affect how an artist does their practice too. Examples came up, someone who actually focuses on performance or social engagement work in advance of the AEP might have a different relationship with someone who's a writer or something along those lines. So I think to an extent, the specific discipline mattered a little bit, but there was also such a wide range of disciplines too. It's hard to tease that out from like a systematic research perspective. That said, taking a half step back, I think, came up earlier. I think things like how practice worked, and this is basically talking about, it came up earlier, well over half of artists, even in advance of the participation, talked about collaborating was part of their practice, both with artists, but also non-arts practitioners, public and community as teachers or public performers. So I think there was some of that was already coming in. But also I think people were able to really build on that. I think Christina's examples, I think, highlight that. Networking is one of those big ones, right? I think 76% noted they gain network connections, right? And those can be with community contacts, other artists or organizations. And that has also longer term impacts too, right? You're building, ties that can actually help you career-wise going on and socially and just like, culturally too. So I think that those are really important things I think were really clearly shown in the research. I would also say just the nature of the program's length and stability. This came up in the focus groups in particular. Some artists just reported they were able to boost both the amount of art they produced and the quality of that art too. This was a factor of the program's length. 2 years is both a long time and also not a long time. I think it all depends on the context. But moving from something like a gig work to something more stable for a period of time, I think really helped both the economic platform of how people were experiencing in terms of income and benefits, and let them actually kind of like set that stuff aside for a little bit and really dig into what their practice was. The only other thing I'd stress is something about the artist's autonomy is the other thing of practice. I think letting how artists figure out how they could actually engage with engage the relationship with the organization they partnered with. And I think that because it was so wide open and was left open at the beginning in a lot of ways, I think people were able to kind of identify pathways that worked for them as well, and both they were able to grow professionally, personally. I think in a lot of those relationships, even if they didn't all work smoothly.
Thanks, Mark. I'm wondering, I wonder if we could move on. You had mentioned that you had some ideas for the future, Mark, and so I'll start with you, and then I'll ask all of our other panelists. I'm interested in what you see could be next, or what the future could be. I'm not asking you to really predict the future, but it would be great, Mark, if you could do that today. That would be wonderful. I'm wondering what the future of sort of artist cooperatives, portable benefits, artist employment maybe could be, should be, or the policies that might support that. And after you go, I'll ask other folks to join in too.
Sure. We're at a weird state, right? I think, you know, talking about if we're in a post-COVID world or whatever that means, I think there was a lot of initiatives that happened during the pandemic. I mean, some of my other work is actually with evictions, and it was also a lot of programs existed over the last couple of years and kind of what's next. And so I think there's a lot of unknowns. I sit here in Washington, D.C., of which there's a lot of policy unknowns at the moment going forward. So I think that said, this has a lot of implications for programs and policy, I think, too. And I highlighted it a little bit up top, I think, talking about the importance of treating artists and cultural workers as workers within workforce policy. I mean, I think this has really shown this. I think the values of the AP have really kind of shown why this is important. And this doesn't just have ramifications for artists and cultural workers, but pretty much everybody. You know, if we're talking about building to a gig economy, the artists have been at the vanguard of this for, well, centuries in many ways. So I think from here, I think it is another illustration of the importance of thinking of policies that really link benefits and protections to people rather than jobs. You know, this is really factoring in how to account for non-traditional employment, to providing benefits and protections to independent contractors, accounting for benefits cliffs, which is a big thing. If you have significant income swings going up and down, that has massive ramifications for, you know, the kind of jobs we even decide to take. And I also would think innovations like portable benefits, I think there is a lot of increased discussion about how to think about that, and support for cooperative models like Tribeworks. I mean, really to provide the structures and continuity and supports for artists so we can kind of build off some of the, you know, the advantages from this particular program, from the lived experiences of artists, even when they had to, you know, change an organization. You know, I think, you know, the showing that there's an example of having something like that actually has really positive benefits. So I would say that's actually one of the big things. And this is kind of a policy thing, but it's a little bit of a research thing. So it's a bit of a cheat. I would also say this also came up on our leadership council discussions. Really, I think this is also useful in thinking about actual longer term impact. You know, not just what's happening right now. I mean, a lot of our work with artists was done in the last year, but you know, where are we at? You know, we're about 6 months after the program ended. Where are we going to be at in a year or 5 years or 10 years? And that's going to be really important, I think, to help people track, just to get a sense of general well-being and financial status, but also, you know, specifically what kind of art, if any, they're actually making at that point, you know, but what are the impacts of this for their longer term relationships, and that's for artists, but also the organizations, like they learned from this process too. So I think they, in many ways, reported they had positive experiences from this and understand more clearly how to actually work with artists to help fulfill their own missions.
Great, thanks. Bo, do you have any thoughts, future predictions, future ideas? Anything you want to share?
Yes, let's see if they come through.
Yeah, let's see.
If they come true. But for what's next, I think I want to really highlight the cooperative movement and how it's growing. So studies that were conducted during COVID were showing that worker-owned businesses are more resilient than typical businesses. And we know that people, especially creative people, need opportunities to define their work and deserve building long-term wealth and having long-term benefits, even if they are considered freelance. So we really envision at Tribeworks a support structure for individual artists and the arts and culture ecosystem as a whole. I'm going to kind of hit on a few things that Christina mentioned. So because we are a cooperative, we are not a traditional organization. We are very human. We care so much about the artists that we serve. And when we did recognize that individuals in rural environments didn't have access to the types of healthcare that they wanted, we conducted a larger poll and changed some of our plans so we could support them in the second year. We also introduced a flexible spending account to help accommodate, because you can't be everything to everyone. We are truly centered at putting artists first and ensuring that they have the resources that they need. Also, when it comes to us being a cooperative, we developed a artist-centered site. So it is a huge networking site called The Space, which is a digital platform connecting artists with both socially and professionally regenerative and helpful resources. It is co-designed with artists and was launched during this program. There are currently 900 members on this platform, The Space. And because it's virtual, we're able to reach people all over the country, but are also having in-person events. So had an event recently in New York. So that is what we're thinking, right? When we're thinking about regardless of what happens in Washington, right? We want to focus and invest in worker-owned businesses and strengthen worker-owned businesses, one that Tribeworks is. Also, I want to talk about the types of partnerships we have. Right. So when we're thinking about moving forward, we're thinking about our partnerships. We really have 3 types of partnerships. First is with organizations. An example of that is Emily Johnson Catalyst, which is a organization that is an activist arts organization. It has salaried employees because they've utilized us to do some of their HR and payroll services to release that burden for them and ensure that the actions that we're doing are in alignment with their values. The second organization is kind of smaller nonprofit organizations and one-off events. So La Lucha Arts. So they're putting on a production and they have a mix of full-time employees and some contractors. We're supporting them by providing full budgetary services and payroll, all their payroll needs. We're taking care of all of their payroll needs. So we plan on fostering some more relationships like that. And then lastly, we have relationships with individual artists. So Gabriel Cortez was actually a grant recipient during AEP and has continued on and is a member of Tribeworks. He utilizes Tribeworks to aggregate his income. So taking all of those different 1099s, pooling those together. He is a beautiful, prolific poet and an activist. So as we move forward with Tribeworks, we want to help provide people with the resources that they need, build cooperatives and community among cooperatives, and ensure individuals have the benefits that they need as well. So whether that be with larger arts organizations, with one-off projects with nonprofits, or individual artists. But I do want to, even though I didn't talk about Washington, I do want to say a whole bunch of snaps to all of the things that were said before from Mark. I definitely think that those changes are also necessary.
Thank you. I'm wondering, Nydia or Christina, do you have sort of future ideas what the, either arts and cultural organizations need or what artists themselves need, right? What would you take from this and build?
I think what I would like to take from all of this is to build professional development and leadership development. Also an opportunity for the issue with the artists that I actually hired was the salary not being at the same level. But being such a smaller organization, it's going to take time to be able to meet that level of salary, especially for Rochester. When compared to New York City, there are 2 different opportunities there and expenses. However, the interest was there to stay on board. And I was just listening to Bo and the HR alignment and the payroll needs. I actually have a vendor that I'm currently working with already. So I wasn't sure if it would, benefit this particular artist to continue through Tribeworks because they were interested in a different type of health benefit that I don't know if Tribeworks was providing at the local level. So we went in a different direction based on the individual's needs. Future, to continue growing and leverage this opportunity that we had with Tribeworks and Creatives Rebuild. I believe that Tribeworks is a wonderful contribution to the community, especially artists, and we'll see, maybe I'll have to make that transition. I don't know. We'll see, Bo. I like where you were coming from. There was a lot of concern about, what does all this mean for us because of what's happening in Washington? But my attitude has been that we just continue moving forward. You continue working hard and have a lot of faith and just make things happen in a different way.
Thanks, Nydia. And Christina, I'll just respond to one thing that Nydia, you talked about twice, which was sort of the salary amount, right? And this was definitely a discussion that our think tank had for a very long time about, and both with our guaranteed income program and with our artist employment program, really thinking through, should everyone for guaranteed income get $1,000 a month across the entire state, for example? And should it be the same everywhere, or should it vary and be different based on the cost of living in different places? And they had the exact same conversation about the salary level. But we decided, I think ultimately the think tank really thought, no, everyone should have the same. And, and it's difficult to figure out how it should be different. But also I think to make the expectations and sort of point to what we want a future to look like, I think that's sort of why that higher number was decided on. Knowing also, though, that there were some organizations where the artists could be making more money than the directors in some places, right? And so, but that signal about what we wanted a future to look like was there. And there's lots of other artist employment models happening across the country that are amazing. There's Manioba in Puerto Rico. There's Artists at Work, which works all across the country. California is doing a California Artist Corps. There's a whole bunch of folks who are doing artist employment in amazing ways and looking at it with slightly different models. And I'll drop in the chat. We did bring all those folks together to have sort of a working group and talk about how everybody was doing things differently. And the National Endowment for the Arts is also in the process of reviewing artist employment programs across the country as well, doing research about sort of what they look like. So there are lots of different models and ways of thinking about this work too. But sorry, Christina.
I do want to share, Sarah, that personally, I think it was a great thing to do because I do believe that the mindset needed to change. Usually artists are the first to be cut, whether it's school or as, contractors, it doesn't really matter. Artists just need to be respected more. So I felt I need to go in that direction. I'm not there 100%, but I'm getting much closer. So I personally think it was a smart thing to make it even across the board. I think that provides the kind of balance, but also more respect for what artists can contribute. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Nydia. Christina, future?
Yeah.
No pressure.
Well, I just want to say I appreciate the comments, Sarah, about kind of creating the world that you want to be in, and also Bo, just about collectivism, which I think is so important. And moving forward, I think trying to maintain some of the parts that work in the institutions that might be supportive and helpful and whatever the best we can, but also like being really creative and and using those collective models. You know, I'm a member of a group called the Bushel Collective, and we have a gallery space and a community space. And we really think of ourselves as being very experimental, right? Like, it's a small town and everybody uses the space. And, you know, we, as the board members, quote unquote, you know, have some say about what happens, but like, really, if, you know, we really work with people to make it possible for creative things to happen, right? In my small community, not always grant funded, sometimes just like winging it, like, you know, it's beautiful, you know, that you work together and pool resources and, you know, create community and experiment and try to heal while you're also trying to make sure that you can maintain some kind of policies and structure that can support artists and organizations.
Great, thank you. I'm wondering, is there anything that anyone wants to add before we turn it over to questions, Q&A? And then I think I'm also just going to talk a little bit about some additional research work that we have coming out around Artist Employment Program. But anything else anybody didn't get asked or wanted to mention before we move into Q&A? No? Okay. I think I will just mention to everyone who's listening that we have a few more research initiatives with the Artist Employment Program. So Hester Street Collaborative has been working in collaboration with Museum Hue and SUNY Empire State and some others to do a statewide participatory action research focused on the impacts of the Artist Employment Program on artists and on organizations. And so that should be coming out I think in the new year. And then CRNY also had the pleasure of working with our own artist that was employed by us, so that we understood what it meant, along with all of everyone else in the state that we were asking to sort of try this model. So our artist organizer, Kevin Gotkin, is also conducting a series of qualitative interviews with deaf and disabled artists to understand how the Artist Employment Program affected the artist's work and lives, and really exploring the idea that sort of work doesn't work for everyone, right? And really looking at sort of benefits, especially, and how deaf and disabled artists in the program felt about their experiences. So that is also coming out soon. And then just on the guaranteed income side, we did put out a research. We put out our preliminary findings, which I can link to in the chat. And then we have some more work coming out there as well, some from the Center for Cultural Affairs at Indiana University. And then there's a big collaborative of folks from NYU Cash Transfer Lab, the Jane Family Institute, Appalachian State Family Economic Policy Lab, and Wash U in St. Louis's Social Policy Institute came together. They're doing another research work. And so we'll have that work coming out, I think, by the end of December. And so there'll be a lot more research where you can sort of look and see how what the impacts were. And again, the process evaluations, we have one for guaranteed income and one for artist employment on our website. If you are interested in doing your own artist employment or GI program, and it really looks at what we did well and what we think we didn't do so well and we can improve on. So with that, I think we can turn over, and Jamie, are you going to help out with maybe some of the questions?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. So you briefly touched on this, Sarah, but it's kind of come up a couple times in the chat, so I'm combining a few questions here. But for models existing that are similar outside of New York, do you have any suggestions or advice for those like seeking to develop a similar type of model outside of New York? And have any other funder coalitions expressed interest in giving this program a try?
So no funder coalitions have expressed interest yet, but we're waiting, we're hopeful. But there are these, I think I said, sort of these amazing folks that were part of our working group, and I'm going to drop that link in the chat right now, who are doing different types of artist employment programs across the country. And I think, you know, The other piece that is important, and I did drop this in the chat before, is our policy playbook that we just released. And the policy playbook really points to ways that we can think about sustainability of artist employment, think about the policies, the labor policies, the workforce development policies, the housing policies, the financial safety net policies, not just the arts and culture policies, right? I think to Mark's point before of if you keep thinking about artists as workers and keep fighting for policies that support all workers, I think we, at least at Sierra NY, believe that then we can have more opportunities like this and more artist employment programs that can happen. So I think we're thinking through how do we make this not just funder driven, but policy driven as well. Did I answer everything, Jamie?
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you.
Great. Oh, and the list of folks, sorry, just the list of folks that were in the working group that came together from across the country. I just put that in the chat sort of, and there were a host of sort of recommendations that those folks came together and said, you know what would be great? It would be great if we could deepen an analysis of the artist employment programs nationwide, which the NEA is doing. It talked about developing tools, resources, and guides for future artist employment. And my colleague Bella Desai is actually working on that with a bunch of these folks. They talked about creating a national research and policy center focused on artists and artists' lives and livelihoods, piloting a national worker cooperative for artists and cultural workers, developing an artist and cultural bill of rights, which my other colleague, Chris Moulet, is working on right now with some artists across New York State, and then convening state policymakers who are committed to creative workforce development. So those folks are sort of working together and recommending things for the field as well.
Great, thank you. Bo, this is a question for you, or a few questions rather. Again, I'm combining some here, but someone asked what the requirements are to become an artist member of Tribeworks. And then there was a follow-up question, is this model meant for only full-time employment, or could it work for temp or part-time setups as well?
Right, so there are a few options, and So there is no threshold, and it can be any type of employment. But if we want to be able to put it as W-2 employment where you can have access to benefits, we do need to ensure that you will be of the monies that you're allowing us to pool together, it's going to hit at least minimum wage. And that's because we need to follow the law, right? So we can't provide W-2 employment unless we know that they're going to at least have a minimum wage. When it comes to being a member, there is a financial buy-in, like a one-time financial buy-in and a small percentage of income. So I'm a member of Tribeworks, and we didn't say this previously, but we are a part of a larger cooperative conglomerate. So OBRAN Cooperative is a conglomerate of many smaller cooperatives, and we are one of those. So even though we currently have artists in New York, New Jersey, and in California, across the entire conglomerate, which we can serve all 50 states. We have some folks we have a group of folks who are actually in Hawaii as well. So if you're thinking about solutions, that is something that we can do. But yeah, so there is a membership fee and a portion of your income that we dedicate as dues to our membership. And then with that, you get decision making and can potentially be on our board and partake in profit sharing within our organization. And I'm not sure if I hit all of the question.
No, that was perfect. Thank you. And then kind of a follow-up to this. And Sarah, I see in the Q&A that you said you would answer this live. So if you want to tag team, did some folks choose to stay with Tribeworks after the 2 years? Apologies if I missed this or Tribeworks doesn't work this way, but if they did, how was retention handled and approached?
Sure,
Right.
Go ahead, Bo. You go. No, you go. You know more than I do, Bo. Go.
Okay, well, we'll do a little bit of both. So So some people did stay within the organization, but then some people also had the experience that Christina had, right? They said, I recognize that this is a 2-year program. It was communicated to me as a 2-year program. I want to take advantage of it and partake in this, but this isn't necessarily something that they were expected to go through and stay on. I think as we grow and continue to do this work, absolutely. And we do have people who have stayed on, but it was not the priority at the beginning of this. The priority was ensuring that individuals had portable benefits, ensuring that people were getting sustainable wages and had those services that we were providing.
And I was just going to add, Bo, that yes, we've had folks who want to stay on with Tribeworks, and both organizations and individual artists. So I think that there's, right, because Bo talked about that there's 2 different ways to join. And I think, and we've had a lot of recent interest from teaching artists and organizations who, especially in New York City, who employ teaching artists that are employed by multiple different organizations, right? So they're being fully employed, they're being paid above minimum wage, but they are getting employment from so many different organizations that they would like a place to hold sort of the W-2 employment. So that's another piece that's happening.
Right. And then also I mentioned this briefly in my last response, but we did this project with CRNY, AEP, but then also have clients that are not related to this, to CRNY at all. So that was like La Lucha and other programs where we just have a relationship with them where we are providing HR and payroll services, helping them with budgeting and anything else they may need when it comes to professional and personal development.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I'll just add one other thing is that there are quite a few organizations who do want to keep on their artists, right? I think Nydia expressed this and others. I do think a lot of folks our team provided a lot of support for fundraising, for looking at NISCA funding, for looking at other types of funding to continue. But we do have quite a few folks who, if they had the funds to be able to continue, are very excited and anxious to continue to do this work and work with their partner artists.
Awesome. Thank you. And that actually answered one of the questions we had in the chat. Just to uplift what this person said, it was incredibly helpful to hear Christina's experience with Tribeworks, especially that it helped during the tension and conflict. The hierarchy and power dynamic between organization versus artist being hired as an employee is not spoken about enough. There was another follow-up question about Tribeworks. In the conversation about benefits for Tribeworks, was there any consideration of fertility benefits? Those tend to add very little to policies, are highly attractive to many people today, and help reduce healthcare disparities.
So yes, that is actually being considered. We're actually in negotiations with our broker now on fertility benefits. So I can't give a specific answer to that, but it has been requested by our members, and we are definitely listening to that. And then also, I just wanted to hit on the last thing that you mentioned about conflict. One of the other things that I really enjoy about Tribeworks is that we're dealing with a lot of artists all over we're dealing with a lot of artists and have seen a lot of these things before. So we are also a safe space to ask questions. I think sometimes, especially when you're dealing with one organization or unsure, we really want to help and be a resource as a thought partner, and who is kind of removed and has seen some things.
Thank you. And Nydia, you responded to this a little bit in the Q&A, but I just wanted to uplift it. And if you want to elaborate more, someone asked for the organizations who participated in the program, did they receive any training or onboarding from either Tribeworks or Creatives Rebuild New York on how to work with or host the artists they would be partnering with? So if you want to elaborate at all, because you said that the level of training was very helpful to ensure that the partnership was successful.
Yes, I thought that was very helpful. the other issue that I think really helps us be successful was the way Creatives Rebuild set this up where we would submit the proposal together as a team. So the proposal was not just coming from my lens, but incorporated the lens and the vision of the other two artists. And I thought that was a very key ingredient with allowing for us to continue going in the right direction. Also, we work together as a team for us following whatever protocols that Creatives Rebuild had on hand. And I thought it was really very useful for us as a team. I mean, I think that the way it was set up, the training was basically you're working together as a team. And I think that's key, because usually as an organization, artists are usually not incorporated into the decision making and the idea of, let's not base everything just on titles. You know, I may be the founder and the CEO or artistic director, but that does not mean that I make all the decisions without your input. And I think many artists feel that decisions are made without their input and without taking into consideration that they have insight and vision as well. And as an organization, I wanted to intentionally make sure that, you know, I did not go in that direction. And Creatives Rebuild platform helped kind of get us moving in that direction. So I appreciate that as well.
Thank you so much. Sarah, there's a question here that connects to a webinar we had last month, actually, which talked about sunsetting foundations and really getting into strategic frameworks around spend downs. So for the Creatives Rebuild New York artists, seeing as you are sunsetting, what has that like communication been like, and what does it look like for them beyond this year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so. We've, you know, known forever that this is a 3-year initiative, and I think have been pretty open and transparent that that is true, right? You know, we were started out of from COVID, right? And there was this real push at the beginning to get the money out the door as quickly as possible, right? I think our team slowed it down a little bit because we knew that we wanted a think tank of artists to help co-design the work with us. We knew that that was important and that we needed it. But there was also this need in the field for cash, right? For money, for cash, for jobs right away. And while Nydia was very nice about sort of the process and training that happened, I think there could have been more, right? You're talking about bringing together organizations, and in many ways, artists are their own organizations often in how they work, right? And you're asking two organizations really to come together to collaborate, and that depending on the amount of time that folks have been working together, can be more difficult or easier. And so, anyway, so we concentrated a lot on sort of just getting the money out the door, designing these programs, seeing if they could work, and then supporting them, because we had much more interest than we ever thought we would have, right? We had over 22,000 folks apply for guaranteed income, and I think somewhere in the 3,000 folks who wanted to do the artist employment program across the state. And then we just had to manage sort of how do we do this at scale and get this out. And so anyway, so with that, we also realized, right, that a lot of what we were learning at this time, which was already happening pre-COVID, we all know, but was that we were understanding the true precarity of artists, right? We had a lot more data about artists as folks were applying for this work. They filled out the Portrait of New York State Data survey, and we started to understand how artists were actually living or unable to live, I would say, right? How precarious their lives were. And so as we saw all of this, I think we became less about just doing the programs and getting the money out the door, which was important, but really started to think about sort of what are the holes for policy and what are the holes in the ecosystem and the infrastructure that have to happen. And so while there won't be more funds from CRNY, at least for artists, right, we have committed to thinking about sort of policy work. How do we get cross-sector policy to happen? How do we help New York State's advocacy infrastructure, which is very under-resourced, to start to work together across the state to advocate for some of the policies that we've put out there. And then really to think about how do we seed work in other places. For example, the guaranteed income team helped launch the New York State Cash Alliance. And there's a group of folks across the state that are now working together on cash policies, right? That if they are successful, will ultimately help artists. And so we've been trying to seed this more sustainable work in as many different ways and places as we can and embed it before we sunset. So while there won't be funding, we are trying to do the best that we can with the amount of time that we have left to ensure that there's still movement making that's happening.
Thank you. And uplifting what Jermaine said here in the chat, has CRNY been a part of international discussions of guaranteed income for artists? And are there any models that predate the pandemic?
Sure. So for guaranteed income for artists, the group that we're closest to is the folks in Ireland who have created a guaranteed income for artists all across their country. So we've been in talks with them, and they also came to, so we had a working group of folks who were doing artist employment programs across the country. And we met with those folks and came up with recommendations. And we did the same exact thing for guaranteed income folks that were doing work with guaranteed income for artists across the country and the world. And Ireland came for that. And then the pre-pandemic models, there are plenty of guaranteed income pre-pandemic models, but there's also pre-pandemic models for artist employment, right? So was the WPA and CETA. We have CETA artists who were part of our think tank, and we had someone who helped design and run CETA in New York City as part of our think tank as well. And so we really looked at those models quite a bit to understand. There's models in France of how they fund artists and all over the world, to try and embed as much and learn as much as we could from those other places.
Right, I think we have time for just one more here. There was a question earlier in the Q&A. Can someone explain a little bit about the logistics of how these programs work for the organizations that run them? And I am assuming that they mean, I guess, on the back end of like Tribeworks and CRNY.
So this is logistics of how these programs work for the orgs that run them. So all in our process evaluation, it should be almost everything that you need to know about how everything has worked, how we worked, at least as an organization, as a sort of an organization that had funds to redistribute. And then our toolkit, our artist employment program toolkit that should be coming out in the new year, will also have an entire information from all of the organizations across the country that are doing this work to try and compile sort of for lack of a better word, the best practices of how one would do this. Is that helpful? And I don't know, Bo, maybe if you want to answer about how Tribeworks works.
Yeah. So at a high level, we are a employer of records organization. So what's the service that we provide is we help organizations. We either help businesses with their payroll, or we help individuals who are freelancers kind of handle their income, so it can be W-2, and then also help them with any kind of tax support they may need in accessing benefits and all the things that come with the W-2. Because there are so many different types of organizations that have so many different needs, and so many different types of people that have really different needs. It really depends. But one thing that I didn't mention previously that that's a service that we provide that I would like to share now is income smoothing. So let's say you are an artist and you know you're going to get one big grant that's going to hit at a particular year, but you want to be able to have benefits or apply for a loan or something of that sort, and you want to have it spread out evenly. We can do that for you. So we'll receive those funds, can give you W-2 employment, so it's not 1099, and then smooth that out. That also can help with your taxes, right? So you're receiving that money over a longer period of time, so it's not 1 year where you're making a boatload of money. That happens very infrequently, where it's actually smoothed out over a series of months or a series of years.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I'm just going to close us out real quick. Today's webinar has highlighted the innovative strategies used by Creatives Rebuild New York's Artist Employment Program to reimagine artist labor and its value within our economy. By embracing benefits, W-2 employment, and cooperative models, this program disrupts traditional structures, offering new pathways for sustainability and equity. Grantmakers in the arts supports these groundbreaking approaches and remains dedicated to advancing practices that center artists and communities in ways that foster economic justice and cultural self-determination. Together, we can build a future where funding structures better align with the needs of artists and the communities they serve. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and also our technician today, Jess. We encourage you to provide us with feedback about your experience today, either via the QR code that you see on the screen or through the survey link in the chat. Webinar registrants will also receive a follow-up email with all of the links that we shared in the chat, as well as a recording of today's webinar. And this is GIA's last webinar of the year, so I wish you all a safe and happy holidays and happy new year. And we look forward to bringing you more programming in 2025. Thank you so much, everyone.